Hey, I'm Shylo and welcome to Bridging the Gap. Today on our panel, we're going to be talking about regulation. What do I need to know? What do I do about cybersecurity? Well, hang around and find out more. So why do you think governments around the world are pushing regulation on, the blockchain industry, both from a cybersecurity perspective and a regulatory legal perspective?
Frank, would you like to go first?
Sure. I actually think they're being okay when it comes to regulation. I don't think you can leave so many hundreds of billions unregulated. Mm-hmm. And so we've had Bitcoin around for 10 years now, plus. And so we don't really have any comprehensive legislation. We've got the EU's MiCA, but even that is not implemented. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just because it's really difficult. I think governments are being okay, and we see now that they're starting to maybe take some missteps, mm-hmm. but there's a big education gap. They're working 8 to 5, doing their normal government job, and trying to understand this sort of internet economy, like independent internet economy, not just like PayPal and like Shopify and stuff. Mm-hmm. It takes time. You sort of need to conceptualize that Ready Player One type alternative way of reality, and that's tough to get seated with. So, they haven't been pushing it too hard, but you can't leave so many, like I said, billions untouched without regulation for so long.
Sure, and you talk to enough people in DeFi and they talk about, we're bringing the hammer down and they can't do this, and and of course there's that outrage, but maybe from a legal perspective, you're saying it's not quite as intense as maybe it looks from their perspective.
Yeah, it's
a knowledge gap.
Yeah, it's a knowledge gap, but it's all very understandable when you think about it from their perspective. And we were talking about Tornado Cash earlier, and it's very understandable why they did what they did, and it's just going to be a matter of advocacy if they can get on board with the propositions that people in DeFi are going for, that it's a tool, should regulate entities, not tech, and things like that. And so we'll see how successful that will be. Like, it is an inevitability, it's going to happen, but it might be just a bit of an ugly process to get to that.
Sure.
Get to that conclusion.
Cool.
From the cybersecurity standpoint, banks are, again, very insecure, right? Passwords for banking information is really easy to get. From the DeFi crypto world, there's not a lot of knowledge. There's not a lot of people who know how to even code or run a blockchain or do a validation or even exchange or swap tokens. Mm-hmm. So the world is insecure. Again, I keep on saying that, but there is, from the cybersecurity threat, it's already been identified from the government of Canada that the banking solutions are insecure. Mm-hmm. So hopefully DeFi and crypto will be able to make people more comfy, have a different portfolio, right? There just needs to be some rules.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah, so just, coming up with some rules to make it more end user friendly, so that they can kind of use it and, not have to deal with as big of a risk as, scams, hacks, exploits.
Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
They happen all the time, right?
Yeah. Find it funny, with that whole Tornado Cash thing where they started blacklisting the Tornado Cash contract addresses, and of course what the DeFi community did, because they're, we can be a little trolly at sometimes, and of course they sent 0.1 Ether to a bunch of really famous wallets so that they would get blacklisted, which is pretty funny. Definitely. You got to admit. So you can see the cheekiness that goes back and forth. It's pretty funny. Yeah.
We definitely have our own sense of humor.
Right.
Right? It is very funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good play.
Yeah.
If I had that much ETH to give out, I would do the same.
Yeah, it's objectively hilarious. So.
Right.
So decentralized finance has often been considered the Wild West, even though the real Wild West was kind of a myth. This is not. And in the Wild West, there's a sense of lawlessness, people just creating anything. which can include scams and other risks to the user. But what do you guys think are some advantages and disadvantages to this kind of open source, Wild West, anyone can make anything that DeFi is?
There's a big difference between the centralized exchanges and the decentralized exchanges. Today, going through PancakeSwap or even Uniswap, it was the language, right? It looks so different. It looks foreign and it's hard. Whereas if you go on a centralized exchange, like Crypto.com or Binance or KuCoin, it looks familiar, right? I think people can identify it. Is it going to change? Absolutely. Is it going to look more like a regular bank? For me, I think so, right? There's different levels of play within cryptocurrency and in this Wild West. You know, sometimes it's super easy and sometimes it's really hard. Right.
So kind of the advantages are from your perspective are like, you know, what we can develop, what things hadn't been thought of, what it can look like. Disadvantages, it can be unfamiliar, scary, and it's complicated.
It's complicated, right? Yeah, it can be very hard to learn, and you know, that's off-putting to a lot of people.
Well, and it's risky. I mean, you know, I've talked to tons of people who accidentally sent tokens to like the main PancakeSwap exchange address
all the time.
You know, to the router, and
it's not like an email.
Yeah.
Right. It's this giant string of numbers.
Yeah, and it doesn't send it back if you put the wrong character in the space.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I would echo that. The advantage is that any good that comes your way, if you're properly in DeFi, is good that you've earned. You know, it's a real meritocracy. You can't go in there blindfolded. If you're building and you make a bad app, no one uses it. If you're a user going in there not quite knowing how things work in DeFi, like, you will lose your money. And so the advantage of that is that people get put in their place, which is good. It's natural. It kind of strikes me as like nature. But the disadvantage of that is, you know, you'll get burnt. And so it's a good thing, actually. It kind of smartens people up.
Yeah, so it's like the school of hard knocks. Only the strongest will have their portfolio survive.
Honestly, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
It is like the Wild West, you know? It's like the advantage is that, you know, there's no taxman if you panned your gold. But the disadvantage is that there's no sheriff to right your wrongs.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah. In both of your experience, what are some examples of, you know, that highlight responsibilities, either security-wise or regulatory-wise, of creators and or users in the DeFi space? You know, something that, you know, happened that maybe shouldn't have, and who the responsibility lies with.
Well, if it's a matter of security, I can't think of any that comes to mind, actually.
I think it comes down to trust. Who do you trust? What community has trust? Trust is fleeting, and it can be hard to come by. There are many bad actors in this space who are promising returns, right? Unrealistic. Usually if it sounds too good to be true, it is too good to be true. So, you know, putting on your critical thinking cap, taking a step back, slow down, really look at what it is that they're trying to solve, right? As content creators and writers, we need to be very mindful of the duties and responsibilities that we have, right? To be honest and transparent.
And, you know, we were speaking earlier offset about, you know, the Terra Luna crash and, you know, whose responsibility that was. You know, was it the code that was the problem and users should have known? Or was it, you know, totally lying with the creators where they should have kept certain things in mind despite the issues with, you know, their stablecoin mechanism, UST?
So for background, there was just a blockchain called Terra, and it got very popular very fast just because it had an application that gave good rewards. And so that sort of inflated the demand. But there were some risks associated with that. And when those risks came into play during a bear market, a lot of those users that had participated to get those benefits that were temporary became burned. And there's been a big debacle over that ever since, because many investors lost a lot of money. And because it is completely unregulated in the Wild West, the question is, should have users known what they were doing and getting into, or should the creator of Terra and his team done a better job of communicating those risks and maybe not even designed a system with those risks inherent in the first place?
It's up for debate.
Yeah, I'm personally in the camp that it should have been buyer beware.
Yeah.
Yeah, like.
I think any financial decision is buyer beware.
You're putting your money into something, and I know.
Sure.
And actually, like myself included, and a lot of guys, like, we did our research, and we knew when to get out. Like, I made a ton of money from Luna, and it's a warm, fuzzy thing in my mind.
Yeah.
But a lot of people got burned by it, and certainly, you have to understand that people see a way to get money quickly, and they go for it. But that's what I like about crypto. It's sort of it's an accountability space. If you're that type to just go in things without much forethought, like, yep, there's a little bit of burning happening there. But
sure.
It is still quite sad when someone goes and puts like 50 grand and they're in a really tough position. They're probably never going to get that back. Like, that's tough. And so that's when you start to see DeFi incorporate those aspects of our systems that we know right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's like some people calling for basically the head of the guy who
Do Kwon.
built Terra.
Yeah.
Like, I think he actually did a pretty good job communicating the risks. Like, that's how many people understood the risks, and it's how a lot of people got out. But there's just a lot of people who didn't do their due diligence, and you can understand why they didn't.
Well, and the info was out there, of course. If it was posted onto social media, it got downvoted by all the Luna people. They laid out what could happen if somebody had billions of dollars. They could destabilize it and get it into a death spiral, right?
Well, yeah, exactly.
So, and the info was there. I mean, we at Elk didn't list UST on purpose on our decks because we just saw the background mechanics, and they're like, no, thank you, please.
Right.
But it was there.
I was just stressed out every day. Like, I knew when things would go south. I knew how they would.
Yeah.
And so every day I'm checking the market. I'm like, oh, shouldn't be today. But then things started going red. I'm like, might be today. And then UST went to 97 cents. I was like, okay.
That's it.
Yep. Yeah, that's...
I'm out.
Yeah.
Off peg for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
There's been some attacks on other stable coins as well recently.
Yeah.
Right? It happens all the time, right?
Well, like at the beginning of DAI, one of their when they started, they went down as low as 83 cents or so.
Yep.
Of course, back then it was more acceptable. It hasn't happened since, but there's a risk even algorithmic stablecoins and those sort of things, right?
Yep. Again, the space is insecure, right? It's new. Not a lot of people know how to interact with it, right?
Yeah.
That's the way it goes.
And the people who do can manipulate it to their advantage.
It can do a pretty good job figuring it out, right? It just takes time and practice. Crypto is not an overnight. It's not an overnight thing, right? It takes time.
Sure. Well, thanks, Frank, and thanks, Audrey. If people want to learn more about what Frank and Audrey do and get in touch, the information is below. So check that out and stay tuned for the next panel.